So what are some problems with utilitarianism? Utilitarianism seems like a very good idea, right? You work to serve the greater good. You work to maximize overall well-being. And yes, sometimes somebody has to be a little unhappy, but that's just the way it goes. Well, that is in fact the seeming problem. Because there are circumstances where it seems like there is something that we ought to be doing, even if it doesn't maximize happiness. In other words, people object to utilitarianism because there is an idea that there are values other than happiness or overall well-being. So consider a problem with duties. Consider a situation where you've made a promise to a friend, okay? You've got a friend who has to get out of his house, or he's going to have to pay extra money for rent, and you have promised him you will help him move. And you are just about the only person who's around to help him out. He doesn't have, a lot of money to pay movers. He doesn't have a lot of friends because he is relatively new to the area and he's just not made very many friends because he's working all the time. Well, the day comes to move and you're like, I really don't want to do it. I really don't want to go help him move. I would be so much happier if I just sat on the sofa and watched a movie. And he'll be okay. He's got another week before he has to be out. He'll have plenty of time to find people to help him. So I'm just going to stay here because I'm going to be far happier watching a movie than helping him move. It might seem, according to utilitarianism, that what you ought to do is stay at home and sit on the sofa and binge watch Netflix, instead of fulfilling the obligation by keeping your promise. And that's the problem. Utilitarianism would say, yeah, maximize overall well-being. But there are obligations we have. There are duties that it seems like we have that we ought not to ignore just because it maximizes happiness. If I've made a promise to someone, regardless of how content I'm going to be not fulfilling it, it seems like I ought to keep that promise if I can. I mean, that's not to say there aren't times when you might not be able to keep a promise. I mean, sure, that happens, I promised to start class on time. But on my way to class, I notice a massive accident and I think that I can help save lives. And so I get out and I help people and I, help the wounded and I calm down, bystanders and everything. And I'm breaking my promise to start class on time because now I'm going to be late to class, but I'm helping overall. I've managed to be able to help get trapped children out of the car before it, gets even more damaged. I've helped paramedics by keeping somebody conscious until they got there. So, these are things, these are good things. It seems like that's a reasonable thing to say, okay, you broke your promise because of these extraordinary circumstances. But breaking a promise because you want to sit on the sofa and binge watch Netflix doesn't really seem to balance out, right? Utilitarianism says go for it, but it seems like we ought not to do that. It seems like keeping our promises ought to be, or rather fulfilling other duties we have, ought to be just as important as maximizing happiness. Does that make sense? Okay, and then there's the innocent hobo objection. All right, so I'm going to tell you a story, and I want you to listen because it's my story, and you can't try and come up with other options because it's my story. So there's this town, small, quaint little town. Everybody's happy. Everybody pretty much knows everybody else. Until one day there are murders. There are several murders in the town, and the townsfolk become very unhappy because there are murders. And they are very scared because the sheriff has not been able to catch the murderer. And so the townsfolk become more and more upset because they haven't caught the murderer, and murders keep happening. And they are so upset that they are on the verge of rioting. Now, if there's a riot, there is going to be property damage done to shops and homes, plus more people are going to be hurt, maybe even killed, okay? You get trampling, you get shrapnel from store windows when they're busted into, and so more people are going to be hurt, property is going to be damaged. The thing is, unbeknownst to anybody, including the sheriff, the murderer has actually left town. He's left town and gone to a neighboring town. But as soon as he entered the neighboring town, he was killed in a car accident. Okay? He dies in the car accident. Nobody ever knew he was the murderer. Nobody even ever knew he came from this other town. So he's dead. He's not going to be murdering anybody else. The problem is nobody in the original town knows this, and they're afraid that there are going to be more murders. So the sheriff has to do something to calm the townsfolk down because he doesn't want them rioting. He doesn't want the property damage. He doesn't want the bodily injury. There's an innocent hobo, okay? This is just a basically nice homeless man who doesn't hurt anybody. He doesn't hurt anybody. He would never hurt anybody. He's just a basically nice guy who prefers living outside. He doesn't want to be in a house. He doesn't want to be enclosed. He just likes sleeping under the stars. And the sheriff knows the innocent hobo. People don't really know him because he's a hobo and who gets to know the homeless people. But the sheriff knows him and knows that he didn't do these murders. I mean, he knows it. He knows that he was other places when the murders were occurring. So he knows the innocent hobo is, in fact, innocent. But nobody else knows the innocent hobo is innocent. So he could arrest the innocent hobo and put him in jail. And he can guarantee that there will be no execution. So while he'll spend his life in jail, he won't get killed. He won't be executed. And if the sheriff arrests the innocent hobo, the townsfolk calm down. There's no riot, which means no property damage, no further injury. Seems like a good deal, right? We can maximize happiness by simply locking up one man. Traditionally, I have students try to say, oh, but the innocent hobo now has, a roof over his head and he has 3 square meals a day. He doesn't want that. Remember, he sleeps outside because he likes sleeping outside. He doesn't want to be inside. So he's very, very unhappy. But given the riots, the property damage, the further injury, overall happiness is maximized if, in fact, he is locked up. But that doesn't really seem right? It seems to violate his rights. It seems to violate justice. So we're sacrificing now an individual's rights and we're sacrificing justice for the sake of maximizing happiness. So we should not maximize happiness at the cost of an individual's rights and at the cost of justice. So utilitarianism has this problem where it places a premium on maximizing happiness. Unfortunately, that means that we're sacrificing other seemingly valuable things. We're sacrificing valuable things like fulfilling our duties and individual rights and justice.